All right, Paul, great to be with you today.
Same here, thank you.
I thought it would be a good idea for us to kick it off talking about the Biden administration's executive order back in 2022, tasking a number of federal agencies, departments, to report on the impact of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. And I believe the Commerce Department, where you were at, was a part of putting a response together there. So I think it would be interesting to start by hearing what were your major takeaways through that process, and what would be interesting for people to know about what you discovered?
Thank you, Jason, and appreciate that question. So in March of 22, there was an executive order on responsible development of digital assets, and there were several reports, more than several reports written. The Commerce Department had the report on competitiveness and innovation, and what does it essentially take for the United States to be a leader in responsible development of digital assets and also their underlying technologies. And essentially what we came up with was 4 pillars: effective and efficient regulation, trade promotion, public-private partnerships, and increased R&D. And I think when a lot has happened, obviously, in the last 18 months. The report was published in September of 22. But I do think those pillars are still relevant. They are still important, and they coincide nicely, I would say, with some of the opportunities and challenges around the U.S. The Bitcoin mining industry. So we're proud of what we did. I encourage people, it's online, just Commerce Department, Digital Assets Report, because it hasn't gotten maybe as much attention as maybe some of the other documents that have come out on this topic.
Yeah, there was a lot that came out on the topic. I think some was more in the right direction than others. I think the Commerce Department was definitely on the money on a number of things about why Bitcoin mining is important, why the United States should be competitive in Bitcoin mining. Obviously, we're all here today because there's work to do in educating various parts of the government, various policymakers, and different agencies about Bitcoin mining. What are some of the areas that you think we should all be focused on in educating? Some of the agencies, parts of the government that have maybe been neglected by the industry to date?
Well, I mean, there's a couple agencies which are sort of obvious, one would be the Department of Treasury. They're obviously very important in this space. Certainly the Department of Energy is important in this space. But I would, in piggybacking on something Senator Lummis was saying earlier, as you think about the global leadership that the United States and U.S. companies can provide in this industry. So think about the State Department, which, obviously their role is diplomacy and U.S. foreign policy. When you think about some of the challenges in as the Senator mentioned, in Southeast Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa, there's a lot of great intersections here. I would also, I want to mention the U.S. Development Finance Agency, Development Finance Corporation, USDFC, which is the U.S. Development Finance arm that partners with the private sector to finance projects around the world to meet pressing needs in various segments. I think it would be important at some point to read them more in on this topic, and what are the benefits, what are some of the challenges, but also how Bitcoin mining can help meet a lot of the pressing needs that we have in what we are now in the mid-21st century. And this technology, this ecosystem, it is part of the solution, I think, to some of the challenges we heard about earlier this morning.
Yeah, it's interesting. hearing both you and Senator Lummis before talking about the benefits, how the United States can lead in advocating for and educating the rest of the world on the benefits of Bitcoin mining to meet energy problems. And that's counterintuitive to a lot of people because, those who may be only an inch deep on the topic just hear energy use and they conclude, how can that lead to more energy? But obviously, there's a lot more to that story. And I think the problem that we often face in this discussion is we're approaching it from a scarcity mindset, from a mindset of, hey, there's only X amount of energy. We have to divide it up a certain way. And in some cases, there are those that believe the government has to play a role in deciding who should get that energy. Obviously, I think that's a very dangerous mindset, a very slippery slope. But how should we be thinking about Bitcoin mining from an energy abundance standpoint? What are the problems that you see Bitcoin mining solving from an energy perspective here at home?
Well, I think there's a couple things to sort of unpack there. I think the first sort of fundamental point is that Bitcoin mining can help monetize a new generation of energy projects where there's going to be more and more demands for energy for various reasons, some of which we heard about again this morning. So that's maybe one fundamental point. Then we sort of break that down and into flexible load resources or demand response and how companies are helping utilities balance electricity grids. I mean, that's very, very obviously critical, important, and probably will be more important moving forward. Then you peel it back a little more into what are opportunities and what's already taking place in terms of reducing carbon emissions, whether it's mitigating methane from landfills or biomass, or creating opportunities from waste. These are stories that are being told more. I think we need to hear more. We need to see more examples of this. This gets to what the senator was referring to earlier regarding innovation and all of the opportunities that strengthen the U.S. in energy competitiveness globally at such an important time, not only in the U.S., but across the board.
A lot of people maybe take for granted how energy is delivered. We are a first world country. We need energy all the time. People, whether it be commercial, industrial, residential applications, people need energy when that light switch or whatever is turned on. And the challenge there is you need to build enough transmission and generation to meet peak demand. But peak demand is very different than low demand and even average demand. There's a huge delta there between that low and average demand and those peak demand periods. But we have to be able to meet both. And the result there is a real energy inefficiency if there's not enough demand to take power in those low demand periods and return that power in the high demand periods. So you touched on that one, what you just talked about. You talked about demand response programs and the flexibility of different types of energy loads, properties that Bitcoin mining has better than any large-scale industrial load. We can bring Bitcoin mining anywhere in the world where there's energy, and we can use it when it is scarce and in surplus, and then we can stop using it and, in effect, return that power to the grid or wherever it needs to be when it is in high demand. And the result of that is you are fixing a financial inefficiency. You are making energy actually more abundant and financially viable to be delivered. And I mean, I think the ultimate result is a better price for consumers because you're reducing that volatility. So the conclusion I get from that train of thought, from that way of thinking, is that Bitcoin mining is critical to being competitive in energy and being achieving energy independence. What is it going to look like? I mean, even extends beyond Bitcoin, but what is it going to look like if the United States is not competitive from an energy standpoint, if its energy costs are not competitive?
Well, I think, obviously without being competitive in energy, you're going to struggle across the board. So I think that highlights how important this topic is, and how we need to get, I think, our heads around it. We heard this morning, this is a policy event. It's not an investment convening. It's not an academic convening. It's a policy convening. And I think some of the issues that you just teased out there go directly to policies and sort of how these issues are going to be addressed, not only at the federal level, but I would say federal, state, local, where all of the stakeholders need to be at the table. I'll say one other thing. I did have the opportunity not too long ago to go down and visit a couple mining data centers in Texas. It was very eye-opening on a number of levels. Again, some of them we just touched on, but I also think another part, Jason, which sometimes gets overlooked, is workforce development and economic development in rural communities and high-tech jobs that don't necessarily need a college degree. This is very, very important in terms of the long term and, addressing even the issue of inequality, which is a big challenge now. We're going to have all these winners, or a few winners and a lot of losers. And rural economic development is a critical issue, and I think you're seeing companies such as yours and others playing a very positive role and training people in your business to then go into high-tech jobs, but also other positions.
Well, thank you for teeing that up. Always love talking about what we're doing in the community. A lot of people think of Bitcoin mining as just a bunch of computers in a warehouse somewhere. And that may be the end product, but like any other large industry, like any other data center, it requires an incredible number of people to make that work and make that work well. So Riot Platforms, as a publicly traded company, one of the largest Bitcoin miners, we employ almost 600 people across all of our locations and subsidiaries. That's a substantial amount of employment that's going into Bitcoin mining. And what's really exciting about what we're able to do is place those jobs in areas and communities that would probably not otherwise get them because other industries don't have that same agnostic view on location as Bitcoin mining does. We are going to where there is excess surplus energy. And I think a great example of that is our facility in Rockdale, Texas, was formerly, or next to what was formerly a Alcoa aluminum smelting plant and an aluminum generation facility. And Rockdale, Texas is one of those towns that was built around one industry, one employer that was there. And when those businesses closed down years ago, because they couldn't compete anymore, unfortunately, that was an entire community devastated and left in the wake of that. And we came in and with this excess infrastructure, employed and reinvigorated this community again. And now individuals far away from a major metropolitan were learning how to build this type of data center, learning how to be a Bitcoin mining technician, learning these advanced skills that they would probably not otherwise be exposed to unless they moved out of our community. And our objective is obviously, as a society, isn't to get everyone into all the metropolitans as fast as possible. We're trying to build vibrant communities all over the place. So I think another very important reason of why the United States needs to be competitive about Bitcoin mining. So, one question I think potentially that we'll end with here, depending on our timing, is kind of getting to the title of our fireside, is how can the United States be more competitive on Bitcoin mining? How can, whether it be this administration or a future administration, be more competitive, make the United States a place where Bitcoin miners can, have a fair playing field, and make the United States a leader in this field?
Well, I think it takes, as I touched on earlier, all of the stakeholders at the table, federal, state, and local level, to create the conditions and environment where companies such as yours and others can succeed, and not only succeed domestically in the U.S., which is critical, but also to succeed globally. And then that gets into some of the other issues about strategic challenges, U.S. economic leadership around the world. But it does take transparency, clear communication, and all of the stakeholders have to be at the table. I'll also say one other thing about, I know Riot's got a big footprint in Texas. Anyone who is interested in American innovation, I strongly encourage you, if you're down there, to drive from Austin through Taylor, where there's a very large semiconductor facility, to Rockdale at the edge of Texas Hill Country. This is, in many ways, the heartland now of American innovation, and you get a better appreciation for size, scope, workforce, and other strengths that we don't always hear about, maybe from conventional sources.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, and I appreciate that. And the last thought I would end on is, we've talked a lot about energy and why Bitcoin mining is so important to developing energy infrastructure and being competitive in industry. And the last point I'd like to make, and hear your thoughts on, is Bitcoin is valuable because there are only 21 million. And as we heard some great discussions earlier today, those 21 million coins are released through the process of proof of work mining. And today, over 19 million of all Bitcoin that will ever be released into supply has been mined, and there is less than 2 million left. And if we believe, and of course I do, that Bitcoin is a incredibly large part of the future global economy, the way people store value and the way people transmit value, then the United States has a limited period remaining here to get a piece of that system. Less than 2 million coins are left to be mined. And do we want that in the hands of the United States and its citizens, or do we want that dispersed across the globe, where the United States has a very small piece that is trying to catch up on? So I know I said the last question was our last question, but we'll make this our last question. What do you think about that supply scarcity argument and the importance of the United States getting a piece of those coins?
Totally agree with everything you just said about the importance of American, not only leadership, but ownership and empowerment. And I think the one other thing related to that is that companies, in terms of how they compete now, are going to have to solve problems in a lot of cases. It's not just about the quarterly statement, and for a number of reasons. And I think there's so many examples now of Bitcoin mining companies solving big problems. It's something the industry should embrace, and we're happy to work with you on those efforts as well.
Well, Paul, appreciate the time with you today, hearing your insights. We now have the very fortunate position of being able to release everyone for lunch. So thank you very much.